the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week.
Hey there, I'm Kimberly Spencer, and you are watching Business Story of the Week.
Fantastic. That is the lovely Kimberly Spencer, our guest for today. And of course, my name is Joshua. I am your host. And today's question is the story you're telling yourself holding you back or propelling you forward? Well, Kimberly is the perfect guest to answer that question for us. Kimberly Spencer is an award winning, high performance, trauma informed coach and trainer. Amazon best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and the founder of crownyourself.com. She's the CEO of Communication Queens, helping visionary leaders transform their self-limiting stories, build their empire, stand out fiercely, and create a body, business, and life that rules. Kimberly, I'm quite excited about this show. Thank you for coming on. How are you doing?
I'm doing extraordinary. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Kimberly, I'm already loving the energy. I'm already loving the enthusiasm on here as we start this off. The way I always start this off is Kimberly. When I always ask, what was a young Kimberly Spencer like? Did she always think about powerful stories of powerful female characters? Was she always this enthusiastic? What would the young Kimberly say to the Kimberly of today?
So, there were two sides of me if you knew me back in the day. There
Wow.
was the one that was very precocious, very outgoing. I literally have a saying that I found myself saying when I was about 4 years old. My mom had me in the backyard and we had the sprinklers going, and she was like, Kimberly, how do you think you're going to get through the water forest? Because I was always making up these stories, and I was like, simple, you just run through it. However, due to some adverse childhood experiences, my dad was an addict. And then during that time that his addiction was the worst, was around the time that I was about 4, 5, 6 years old. So things really shifted
Mhm.
because he lost both of his parents, who he had a very complex
Oh
relationship with.
boy.
And his only coping mechanism was alcohol. And it
Right.
turned him into a monster. And while I saw my parents successfully grow a company over the course of 30 years to multiple millions of dollars, I also saw the hardship in the early stages of my life. And so
Yes.
there was the precocious go-getter who I was young and I was starting little businesses on the side to selling bags of glitter water to my neighbors. But
Yeah.
then when you put me into a larger social environment, I had selective mutism, and I didn't speak in kindergarten for 6 months. I was so shy. I stalked my best friend around the playground, so petrified to talk that
Mhm.
she finally one day turned around and just asked me to be her friend, and the clouds parted, and suddenly I
Oh
had a
wow.
friend. But I was deeply traumatized from some experiences from my father. And
Oh
looking
wow.
back now, I see how that played into me and my voice being silenced.
Mhm.
And so I had to relearn who that
Right.
precocious, enthusiastic version of me was. I had to relearn the
Wow.
version who was audacious and who would just
Mhm.
go for things and who would literally, as my tattoo says, just run through it.
Just run through it and run through it. You did. Not only you run through it, you actually, you know, you probably were raising your hands towards the end of it. And I feel that energy right now. You rediscovered yourself, and you're teaching others to do the same. As of course a high performance coach, and but I feel like not just in business, but in life in general as well. Now that you feel like you have rediscovered that, do you feel like it's fulfilling to teach the same to others? But that question is quite obvious. More importantly, how does it feel helping others go through the same journey and rediscover themselves through that? And what do you think is the biggest challenge that the obstacle that we have to go through when it comes to, rediscovering ourselves?
I think it comes down to trust and learning how to
Wow.
trust ourselves again. And
Wow.
a lot of times, I mean, I've worked with clients who they've worked with many, many business mentors and coaches and masterminds and programs. And the
Yes.
problem is that from the energy and intention that they were joining these programs, it was from a lack of trust in their own selves. And so the experience of being able to coach people to the point where they start to relearn what their subconscious success strategy is. Like I always say, I'm not the coach who's going to tell you how you should do it because I'm not you. I don't know
Mhm.
how you're going to do your business
Yes.
the best. I
Yes.
know that we can unlock together as a
Mhm.
do with process what is your best way of doing business, what is your subconscious success strategy so that you
Mhm.
can leverage that will be 10 times more successful than anything I could should at you. And so
Precisely.
from that's when I get clients achieving their 1 year goals in 3 months, where they hit $4 million in bids, like our client Dana Otis, or they achieve their childhood dream and they buy themselves a plane
So
and,
cool.
scale to the number one in their industry in the world, like our
Wow.
client Stuart Morris. These experiences come from when you start to understand your own level of performance. And I think one of the great things is most of my clients come to me with a level of self-awareness that they're the problem. And I think then that's the hard conversation to have,
Right. That's
is
it.
as a leader, when you're like, it's the Taylor Swift song. It's like, hey, it's me. Like the problem is me.
Mhm. But that's the thing. It's the first thing I feel like is being aware of, like, that the level of self-awareness. Like, is it me? Am I the problem? Am I the bottleneck in my business, or am I holding myself back? How do you go from that to being, say, like, hey, maybe I'm not the problem, or say, like, what type of kind of mindset do we need to start utilizing so we can be more, trusting of ourselves and more open to possibilities? Really be believing in yourself, I think, is the difficult part. You can be successful, but you not really believe in yourself, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, yeah, you absolutely can. I've worked with a lot of people who
That's it.
were successful and had success on paper, but they still were struggling with self-doubt, with trust,
Hmm.
with leaning into those desires and dreams on their heart. Like they'd done the thing that had generated profit or income, or that they knew was kind of like a shoe-in that they could scale. But
Right.
those things, like maybe it was writing a book, or maybe it's getting yourself out there on more podcasts and getting
Yeah.
more visible, and you being the front runner of your business.
Yes.
Those things, those are the desires that a lot of times it's easy to hide behind the shadow of your business.
Of
And I
course.
think, to
That's it.
answer your question, the biggest thing that I've seen that makes a difference
Mhm.
in building that self trust is radical ownership. And I
That's
live
it.
by a principle, and I teach this
Mhm.
to my clients, because when you're coming from a trauma situation, or if you've had
Mhm.
childhood trauma, or if you've had
Mhm.
some sort of business shock trauma, like a bankruptcy or a
Oh,
business partner buyout that suddenly was, out of nowhere, these experiences can keep us stuck in what's called the drama triangle. And inside the
right.
drama triangle, you have the victim role, you have the villain role, and you have the hero role. The problem is that you're still stuck in the same paradigm of the drama triangle, no matter what role you're playing. And in
Wow.
order to free yourself, the victim has to turn into the creator of their circumstances. The villain
Oh.
has to turn into the challenger of paradigms and the disruptor of industry. And then
Mhm.
the hero has to turn into the coach. So in the drama triangle, where flips on, before you flip it on its head, the victim role, the blame is on everybody else. Oh, it's my team member's fault. Oh, it's my employee's fault. Oh, it's this, it's the economy's, it's everybody else's problem except your own. Now, most of
Mhm.
my clients, because a lot of them have had some form of trauma in some way, I think we all have had our fair share, between no matter what it was, we all
Mhm.
experience it and process it differently. But because of that, it's very easy to be in that role. Most of my clients don't want to be in that role.
Yeah.
And they would rather, just because they're the leader, they would rather put themselves in the role of the villain,
That's it.
where they create self-sabotage situations. And
Okay.
in that villain role, thus you take 100% of ownership and then 10% of somebody else's ownership and 10% of somebody else's ownership. And unfortunately, that prevents other people from having their own learning and their own experiences, and it keeps you in an attachment relationship. And then you
Oh,
have
interesting.
the coach role, which is the innate or the hero role inside the drama triangle.
Please.
And
Uh-huh.
the hero is the enabler. The hero is the one, and I played this role with my father. Like I would sweep in and I would take him to the hospital and then make
Wow.
sure he was getting the drug test to make sure that it wasn't a stroke, that it was just his blood alcohol level was over the limits
Oh,
for
that.
driving home. And
Mhm.
those experiences of being that hero, in some ways, though, I was enabling his behavior. And it wasn't until the moment that I staged his intervention and actually broke our relationship and said, I'm no longer participating in this hero role. I was
Wow.
newly married. My husband and I wanted to start a family. And I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not available for that energy of being in the hero role. And I pivoted into the role of the coach with my father and set a very clear, hard boundary that if he was drinking, I was not going to be a part of his life. And I think one of, I would say my greatest achievements, but it's also his greatest achievement, was that for
Mhm.
the last 4 years of his life, he remained sober off of alcohol and he got to have a relationship with me and with my son. And that meant so
Wow.
much to me. And
Lovely.
in seeing him in that role. But that's the power when you flip the drama triangle and the
Mhm.
victim becomes the creator, the villain becomes the challenger and the disruptor. That's
Right.
a role that when you get to embrace it, that's when you revolutionize industries. That's when you become the Steve
That's it.
Jobs. And
I
then
love
when
that.
the hero switches into the coach role, that
Mhm.
coach role, then you have healthy boundaries. Then you have do with process coaching. Maybe it's
Wow. That's
coaching
it.
your team
Yeah.
where instead of, oh, let me swoop in and do the project for you because you're underperforming,
Mhm.
instead, but you feel bad and you don't want to fire the person because they have a family and they're dependent on the job and all of the reasons that go into these
Gosh. Oh
wishy-washy
gosh.
boundaries.
Uh-huh.
Instead, the coach gets to hold someone to a higher standard and
Mhm.
says, hey, I believe in you. From the moment that I hired you, I knew that you could fulfill this job. However,
Mhm.
you've been underperforming in this and this area. And I believe that together, if you need a little support, I'm happy to work with you through it so that we can get you to this level where I know you can perform it and where you used to perform it. But if you don't meet at this level, unfortunately, we're going to have a different type of conversation in a
That's
month's
it.
time. And
That's it.
that way you hold a boundary, you provide support, but then you also allow the other person to take their 100% of responsibility. You allow
Mhm.
the other person to rise into their next level.
That's it.
Nobody
That
rises into their next level while being enabled.
ethical ownership, I think, is very, very crucial. That is the center to that. I think you aren't able to encourage others, motivate others to take ownership, 100% ownership of what they do, of their role, of their task, and all that, unless you yourself take ownership of that. That's so difficult. Like, that's so terrifying. People don't
It's
want to
not a
admit
sexy
they're wrong.
conversation.
That's it. People don't. I mean, you're a boss, you're the leader, you're the owner, and then you'll be like, oh, "Man, I made mistakes. I'm so sorry." No one wants to have that conversation. It feel like you. So you flip the table from being the hero to the coach. The others from the being a villain to the challenger. I feel like both still requires a degree of radical ownership. How do we even start getting to that mindset of it's okay to be wrong? It's okay to have mistakes when it feels like you have to maintain some sort of image, so to speak. Like you
hmm
have to maintain this authority. What kind of mindset do we need to be cultivating?
Well, I've seen from some very successful companies that when mistakes are allowed, it's not that you aren't allowing mistakes. It's not that you have to be this embodiment of perfection. People
Right.
actually don't buy perfection. Like if I came on here and said that I never struggled with anything, people would be like, oh, yeah, it's nice for her, but she's never actually had like this struggle, this struggle, this struggle. But I came on and I
Hmm.
was able to share some pieces of my story that said, hey, I've had some difficulty in my life too. And that
Okay.
humanizes a person. And people don't buy perfection, they buy people being human. And this is why
Yes.
I love the example of that I give in my book, Make Every Podcast Want You, that's coming out in September.
Yeah.
of Jennifer Lawrence and Anne Hathaway. And in 2013, both these two amazing actresses were on the scenes.
Yes.
They're super talented, both Oscar winners, phenomenally talented, highly paid actresses. And
Yes.
everybody loved Jennifer Lawrence because she's flipping off the camera. She's sharing about how she's eating burgers in her Oscar dress. And the press eviscerated Anne Hathaway. Why? Jennifer Lawrence came off as human, Anne
Yeah.
Hathaway came off as perfect. And that experience, it shows the paradigm in a very, spotlighted profession. But
Mhm.
even in real life, in day to day, if you see someone who you perceive as perfect, that
Mhm.
automatically creates a division in our subconscious mind of
Right.
this person is separate from me because we
Yeah.
know that we're not perfect. And I think
Mhm.
as leaders, when you can lead consciously with an openness about mistakes and say, hey, that last month where we didn't hit our KPIs, that was on me. And I'm leading the ship and I didn't hold you to that higher standard. I believe that we can rise to this level of what
Yes.
our goals are. And
Absolutely.
that demonstration of radical ownership. And I have
Mhm.
a principle that I live by that is that which is consciously manifests happily. It's very simple.
Mhm.
That which is consciously manifests happily. That which is unconscious manifests unhappily. And so, when anything as a leader, as a mom, in any role in my life, where I see something manifesting where I'm like, ooh, those are results I don't like. Ooh, that's behavior that I don't like. I always ask myself first, how am I creating that projection in
Mhm.
my world? How did
Exactly.
I create this? Maybe it was a bad hire. Maybe I didn't realize, but my attitude for the past 2 days has been a little crappy, and thus my kids are a little extra snippy with me. It's being able to have that awareness of that which is conscious manifests happily, that which is unconscious manifests unhappily. Live by that principle and allow yourself the awareness to take the radical responsibility and the radical ownership of saying, this result that I don't want, that I don't like, this problem in my life is 100% my creation. Well, the beautiful thing is, if it's 100% your creation, then you can also create something new. It just
That's
means that
true.
you're a
Wow, I
powerful
love that.
creator of your circumstances.
And this is comes back to what you teach when it comes to stories. Like you said, telling the stories to be relatable, so to speak. We tell the story of Jennifer Lawrence and Anne Hathaway being perfect. It's just, I feel like it's just a matter of being relatable enough to, like, just you're regular person. You're a regular person, just like everyone else, and having that connection right away with people being able to relate to you already gives them the courage that, hey, she's just like me, and I can. If he makes mistakes, I can make mistakes. But I feel like it starts with the stories that you tell as well to yourself and to your team, your family, your audience. And this is something that you teach in your program, and of course,
Mhm.
is also plastered all over your beautiful website, crownyourself.com, for our audience and listeners out there. Kimberly, talk to us about the role when it comes to stories. And I feel like this is very central to what you do and what you teach, and of course, to your journey as well.
Yeah, the stories that we tell ourselves most often are unconsciously created and not true. So I
Mm.
had a story growing up that I was broken, damaged, and a victim because of the experiences that I went through with my father that ranged from all multiple forms of abuse. And from that experience, I was able to look at my life later on, having moved out of the environment of my family home. And when I was on my own, I recognized that I ended up struggling with a 10-year battle with bulimia. And that was my way of controlling the
Oh,
situation that I had at home. It was my coping mechanism. It was also my way of of assigning blame, and quite frankly, to my father. And once I had moved out of the environment, because you can never heal in the same environment, your environment is incredibly essential. That's why I love podcasts like this, Joshua, because like you are allowing people to surround themselves with a new environment in their earbuds, in their brain, that
Yes.
exposes them to different stories
Yes.
of
Yes.
different leaders, of entrepreneurs, of successful people, which
Hmm.
then trains our unconscious mind of, oh, if it's possible for them, it's possible for me too.
That's it.
And it
Wow.
allows you to shake the frame of different belief systems. And so my
Mhm.
first business when I was 19 years old, I was a Pilates instructor, a freelance Pilates instructor. I eventually had my own brick and mortar studio in LA. And when I started teaching, that was part of why I was able to move out of my parents' home.
Right.
And I was suddenly was teaching 10 hours a day. So I was being exposed to
Wow.
10 different belief systems a day, because clients at a Pilates studio talk like clients at a hair salon. Like, you're going to learn about their life, you're going to learn about their marriage, you're going to learn about all the
Mhm,
things
mhm.
while you're also like kicking their butt. And that experience, suddenly I started to see different belief systems around people's marriages, around people's
Right.
boundaries, around people's beliefs around productivity and like what
Wow.
defined busy, like all of these different beliefs from all of these different ecosystems and environments. And I started to really assess, my God, that struggle with bulimia that I had, it was never my father shoving my finger down my throat. That was me. That was my choice for 10 years to do that. And even though I
Mhm.
wanted to blame him because I could point the finger at all the reasons,
Right.
ultimately the actions were mine. And I think that that's the first place to look, is when you look at blame and what you're assigning blame to, then suddenly when you trace it back, the actions that result in the blame, that come from the
Right.
thoughts and the feelings that we feel, the actions are always ours, or the inactions. So for example, if
Right.
you blame the economy and you're going into sales conversations with potential prospects and you're going in with the feeling of, oh, I don't know if they can afford it, or thoughts of, I'm probably going to have to discount it, or, oh, I don't think I'm going to
Right.
make this sale because the economy. And so you're blaming the economy, but ultimately your energy going into the
Yes.
sale is going to be far less confident, which may probably result in not getting the sale, because people won't feel your level of confidence and competence that comes with you talking about your product or service. So those actions, we have to take responsibility for our actions. Our thoughts and our feelings, those come and go. And yes, take responsibility for those. But ultimately,
Yes.
thoughts, feelings, and beliefs translate into actions in this physical world. And
Right.
when we look at what are the actions that we're avoiding, that's a great place to start as a leader, to
That's it.
say, what is it that I need to start working on?
That's it. That's it. I love that because there's this thing that the sticky note that I always have on my office in my desk. It says the success that you're looking for is in the action, the the activity that you are avoiding. It's right there. It's right there. You're avoiding it, but it's sometimes when it comes to stories, it's just so much easier to tell ourselves that, that's not really my fault, that I was dealt with a bad card, so this is just gonna be my life, right? But I love that you how you call this, you reminded us that you can rewrite your stories. You can rewrite it with action, taking
Yeah, you
action.
rewrite it with new action. I mean, I'll give you an
Hmm.
example of just
Please.
today. So my book is coming out on September 30th, Make Every
Hmm.
Podcast Want You. And I'm so excited for this to be coming out.
Hmm.
And yet every step of the way, I have felt slight nausea. And it's not just morning sickness, from like the fear of this like courageous leap. And then because I have an Amazon bestselling book, it's a multi-author book called The Start. And this is my first solo book. And it
Wow.
feels like there's something that it's like standing in front of an audience naked, where it's like they're reading my writing. And now I'm really like,
Interesting.
people read my writing every day because I post all the time on social media and I'm very active.
Yes.
However, there's something about the permanence of it being in print in a book
Yeah.
that just gets like, it brought up nerves. And I have to say, I
Hmm.
sent out 30 emails today to early readers, and every time there was that slight bit of like the fear that came up of just like, oh my gosh, what if they don't like it? What if they see
Yeah.
flaws in it? When, all
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
ifs, or because I was sending it out to some big podcasters and mentors of mine, I was like, what if, who am I to send this? Like, all of these
Yeah.
thoughts were coming through my head. But you know what I still went ahead and did? I still sent the emails. I still sent them the book.
That's it.
I still
That's it.
made the ask. I saw the thoughts, I felt the feelings, and I did it anyway.
Wow, I love that. Kimberly, of course, your experience has also been diverse. Your stories has also been, quite the challenge. You get to tell them today. You also have experience in the entertainment industry. As we begin wrapping this up, I want to ask that crucial part of your life because, I mean, action stories is very, very rich with stories. The entertainment industry, of course, has a lot of that. Talk to us about what was the Kimberly like, or what was your career like previously involved in the entertainment industry, and what lessons and experiences do you take from that that is helping you now today, also with your clients?
I mean, when I first wanted to work in the entertainment industry, because I never thought entrepreneurship was an option, because in the beginning, seeing you see, what you're shown,
Right, of
and I
course.
didn't see entrepreneurship as a success. I saw entrepreneurship as a struggle. Like, I saw
Okay.
we were struggling for 10 years. Like, so there were times when we couldn't afford certain things and couldn't afford to go on vacation. So like, I never saw that as an option until later on in life. But I
Mhm.
did see in show business people making the income and the impact that I wanted to make. And so I made the decision early on to go into
Right.
show business. And my
Really?
improv teacher from, I would say, when I was 15 years old, she said, Kimberly, she said, just remember, it's called show business for a reason. Like, you
Oh,
got to know
okay.
the business. And so I took that to heart, and I graduated. I graduated high school with multiple college scholarships, chose to drop out of college 2 weeks before I got started because they wouldn't allow me to work in the industry. And I
Yes.
said, well, what better way to get experience? And I
Mhm.
took every free coffee getting, script reading job that I could as an internship.
Mhm.
My parents were very supportive of that. I'm very grateful to my family because in that time they saw my hustle and they
Wow.
saw how entrepreneurial I naturally was, and they believed in me and said, "Okay, the funds that we set aside for you for college, we'll put into you joining networking groups, you joining
Wow.
mentorship,
Wow,
you
that's very
getting."
cool.
It was very cool parents, very cool. Like, they have always believed in me. And that experience, I started working at an agency. Well,
Mhm.
now our Communication Queens guest podcasting agency, where we're placing high level CEOs on podcasts, that
Mhm.
same experience translates into how we run our agency 20 years later. Like, the
Mhm.
experience of reading multiple scripts for production companies, that level of experience of reading through story after story, you start to see the patterns of a story. Now, really,
That's
there's
it.
only 7 story archetypes that humans recognize, and our
Uh-huh.
unconscious mind speaks in patterns. So
Wow,
if
that's
a
so cool.
story deviates
Uh-huh.
from these patterns, that's when the movie's a flop. Like, that's when the
Mhm.
movie fails.
That's it.
The
Yeah,
same is true when you're
exactly.
speaking on a podcast interview. The same is true with the stories that you're telling yourself. You're going to see a similar story
Mhm.
arc of the inciting incident, the rise to the conflict, the success or failure, and
Mm.
then the result or the belief that you have formed
That's it.
from that experience, positive or
Right.
negative.
Mhm.
Every single story that humans tell ourselves, those they follow the same pattern. And in
Wow.
recognizing
Mhm.
that, when I had my opportunity to co-write a feature film that was very niche,
Mhm.
most people ask me, because I was the only woman on team, they were like, they see me and I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm crowns and I'm bright and I'm sparkly and I'm in heels. And I got asked a lot, like, did you only
Mhm.
write the girls' parts? And fortunately, my co-writing partner and director, Nick Parada, was so kind and was like,
Mhm.
no, she wrote the first, third, fifth, seventh, and ninth draft. Like,
Mhm.
we went back and forth, but like those experiences, because when you understand the human story, like the movie was, yes, it was about motocross. Yes, there was drugs and partying.
Mhm.
All of that could be researched.
Mhm.
The story was basically about someone wanting to belong. And we've
Right.
all had that experience. Doesn't matter if it's entrepreneurship or high school. Doesn't matter if it's, super bad or Elwood's trying to fit in at Harvard. Like,
That's it.
we all know that story of trying to belong in an
Mhm.
environment that doesn't accept us and
I love
trying
it.
to contort ourselves to fit in. And what is the difference between truly belonging and being authentic and being that contorted version of ourselves where we've cut pieces off to fit in?
That's
And that's
so
what the
cool.
story ultimately was about.
That's
And
it.
so I'm super proud of it. Danny Trejo was in it, and it was great, and it had
So
motocross, and it was
cool.
super
Oh,
fun.
that's so cool.
Definitely. And I know for a fact that movie has saved 3 lives. And people, when they watch it, believe me,
Wow.
when I show my clients the movie or the
Uh-huh.
trailer, they're like, "You wrote that?"
Oh my
Because
goodness.
it's
Oh
there's
wow.
a lot of cursing and drugs, but at the same time, I'm like, yes, and here's the moral of the story. And
Hmm.
it saved 3 people's lives. And I can tell you that, like, I am of the utmost belief that when you change your story,
Hmm.
when you alter your story and you're able to see how things happened for you and not to you, then
Hmm.
suddenly that's when your story gets to become a vehicle for other people's possibility. I mean,
I
that's what
love
my
that.
TED Talk was on, was how our stories
Hmm.
are testimonies
Yes.
for possibility. And
Yes.
when you have the power in your entrepreneurial story or your business's brand story to
Hmm.
showcase the level of the transformation that can happen from your products or services, or just the lessons that you learned along the way,
Hmm.
that provides inspiration and power to people because it shifts perspectives.
That's it. That's very true. And I love that it gives people the courage to tell their own stories.
Yeah.
It really is. That's it. That when you shape it that way, it allows you show the bravery that okay, I'm gonna put my story out there for everyone to see. It allows people like, hey, I can tell my stories too. And Kimberly, that is very transformative in life and business. And I'm glad that you shared us that today and shared us your story as well. I'm very it's very cool. And I feel like I love these. I like these topics when it comes to storytelling. I feel like society is built. The fabric of society is built on stories. Just history
Hmm.
of our lives and our, our time is told through stories. Kimberly, of course, the website is crownyourself.com. The audience and listeners out there, where else can we connect with you?
Yeah, if you're wanting to get booked on more podcasts, head on over to communicationqueens.com. And if you want to grab the book that comes out on September 30th, then head on over to Make Every Podcast Want You.
Fantastic. Communicationqueens.com. Make every podcast want you.
Dot
Crownyourself.com. Of course, the queen herself, Kimberly Spencer. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Joshua, thank you so much for having me. It's been my honor.
To all our audience and listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Kimberly was very lovely. She was so fun. And thank you for watching the episode. We will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.